Welcome to Sunspots, where we explore the many ways that the Holy Spirit is working in the people, places, ministries, and missions on the surface of the sun. That is, the Synod of the Sun. I'm Valerie Young, your Synod leader. My prayer is that you find inspiration, community, and connection in the sun. Hello. Well, we've been gone for a while. Thomas Riggs, who's basically our producer, the Synod's communications and administration coordinator, had a long-awaited honeymoon. We had a Synod assembly, and I took some vacation time. So essentially, we've been out of the habit, but we're back. And today, I will be speaking with General Presbyter Reverend Stewart Smith from the Presbytery of Arkansas. Stewart is a lifelong Presbyterian who was born as a preacher's kid in Charlotte, North Carolina. He moved to Arkansas while in the first grade and grew up in the Graham Memorial Presbyterian Church in Forest City. He served on one of the earliest versions of the Presbytery of Arkansas Youth Council while he was in high school. He graduated from Trinity University in San Antonio with a degree in accounting and became a member of First Presbyterian Church in San Antonio, where he was elected a deacon. After several years of work with Diamond Shamrock Refining and Marketing Company, he experienced a call to the ministry and attended Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. While there, he did a year-long internship at the St. Andrew Presbyterian Church in Lynchburg, Virginia, and served for a year as a student co-pastor at the Youngblood Memorial Presbyterian Church in Robinson, Texas. After graduation from seminary, Stewart served as associate pastor of the First Presbyterian Church in Fort Smith, Arkansas for 7 years. In 2001, he accepted a call to become pastor of the First Presbyterian Church in Springdale and served there until accepting the call to become general presbyter in October of 2015. In the Presbytery of Arkansas, he has served on the Camps and Conferences Committee, the Christian Education Committee, the Committee on Preparation for Ministry, and the Committee on Ministry. He served as moderator of the Presbytery in 2007 and moderated the General Council in 2008. Stewart is married to Laura. She is wonderful, and she's an elementary school teacher in Maumelle, and they have 2 sons, Ryan and Alex. In his spare time, Stewart is a runner, a jogger, a biker, a golfer, just a general sports guy. So I hope you will enjoy our conversation. Good morning, Stewart.
Good morning, Valerie.
Thanks for being with me. We had a little of a jilted start there, but it looks like we're working now. So thanks for being with me.
Good, glad to be here.
How is it going in Arkansas?
Well, as you know, and the listeners know, it's a very challenging time for the church. So, we're busy in a number of directions, just trying to respond to what's happening in the church right now. And so it's a challenging time.
Yeah. So let's start from the beginning. Tell us your story in the thumbnail, and how did you end up as an EP?
This may be a long thumbnail, but I am a preacher's kid. My father was a Presbyterian pastor, grew up in Eastern Arkansas, and never really dreamed of getting into the ministry as a child. I went to college at Trinity University, San Antonio, Texas.
Yay.
And bounced around from an engineer to trying to be a geologist at one time, until somebody came and said in 1981 it wasn't a good time to enter that field, and I switched and became an accountant, and graduated and worked for an oil and gas company. Your Texas listeners will remember Diamond Shamrock. I was an accountant there for 6 years. And simultaneously, I had joined First Presbyterian Church in San Antonio. And I was feeling dis-ease with what I was doing with my work, and had joined the church, had been elected as a deacon, and had this disconnect between being unfulfilled in my work life and just being very fulfilled with what I was experiencing at the church. We were visiting, the deacons there at the time were helping with hospital visitation. And, you know, some of the other deacons were talking about how uncomfortable that was to go visit strangers. And I was just loving it, you know, is because I think there was such a difference between what I was being unfulfilled in my work life and experiencing that. I had was looking into graduate work to maybe go somewhere else. And I met my wife to be, Laura, and we started dating and think I need to wait and see where this relationship is going before I make a move. And after we got married, I was trying to think, okay, I need to do something different, but what can I do with my accounting skills? And I actually interviewed with the Senate of the Sun.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for a financial position, and flew up to Dallas.
When was this?
1988 or 1989, somewhere in there. And I flew up and visited with Bill Fogelman, who was the Senate leader at the time. And he listened to me kind of explain what how I was wanting to use my gifts for the church, and ask questions about my work. And he kind of looked at me at the end of the interview and just said, you're not going to get this position. And I was, you know, a little bit disappointed at hearing that, and said, after listening to you, he said, I think you will be just as unfulfilled in this position as you are in your current position. And he said, I suggest that you have articulated to me a calling into the ministry. And I want to ask you to go back and talk with the pastors at the church there, talk with your wife and family, and consider that. And, you know, I left a little bit disappointed, but, you know, after a day or two and reflecting back on the conversation, thought, you know, he was probably right about that. And I started then looking at seminaries at that point, and, you know, felt very affirmed by various people all the way along, and ended up going to Austin Seminary in 1990. And my first call was in Arkansas at Fort Smith. I had a wonderful experience at an internship out in Lynchburg, Virginia. And the church wanted me to come back and be their associate pastor. Okay, so I was probably headed back to Lynchburg, Virginia, until my father got cancer. And it was a seminary professor at Austin Seminary, Pete Hendrick, who let me know that the cancer was a death sentence. My parents had shielded me from that, not wanting me to change my plans because of that, but said, if you want to spend any time there with him before he dies, you know, you might want to look at Arkansas.
Right.
And First Presbyterian in Fort Smith had an associate pastor that was open, and a very quick interview process. I ended up serving as an associate pastor in Fort Smith for 7 years. Worked with youth and just had a wonderful ministry there. And in 2001, I took a call to be the pastor at First Presbyterian Church in Springdale, Arkansas, which was closer to where my mother was living in Bella Vista, and served there for 14 years. Never had mid-council work on my radar at all. I remember I served as moderator of the Presbytery 07, 08, and I remember one of the Presbytery staff saying at the time, you've got the gifts, the skill set for mid-council work, you ought to consider it. And I just kind of laughed it off. You know, I said, I really don't think I've got any interest in that. And, you know, about 7 years later, when Bill Galbraith was retiring from the position, I had about 3 people from the presbytery say something to me about it. And I thought, well, maybe I ought to at least listen to that. And at the time, after 14 years in Springdale, I was kind of sensing perhaps, perhaps it was time to start considering another call before I got, at that age when it's more difficult for older pastors to move. And I interviewed with the search committee. So I assumed it was, they interviewed Stewart as a courtesy interview just because they knew me well. And it's like, well, we've got to at least, give him an interview. And was pretty shocked when I got the call a few weeks later that they were asking me to accept the position. So, and it kind of made sense, I guess, looking back, that we had a history, at least recently, of having former pastors move into this role as opposed to folks who had veteran experience in the mid-council world.
So I didn't know that about, well, I guess maybe if I'd have really thought about it. So they were accustomed to calling people from within the presbytery.
Not necessarily. My predecessor had come within the presbytery, but before that, it had been from outside the presbytery.
Okay.
But it had been pastors where their career had more been in pastoral ministry rather in
right. So a first time mid-council leader. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, are you having fun?
Valerie, people ask me that a lot. Are you having fun with it? I don't really think of this as fun work. There are a lot of difficult situations that mid-council leaders have to deal with, and a lot of situations where the path forward is not clear. There may not be a seemingly positive outcome with either direction that you take, and you kind of have to just use your gut a lot and go with the direction that seems to be the least damaging alternative, and kind of move forward. So it is not boring work by any means. But fun would not be the word that I use to describe it.
That might be
I find it very stressful, very challenging work.
Yeah. So what would you say is, well, let me rephrase that. What's your assessment of how the church is doing in the midst of what most of us think is or hope and pray is the back end of this pandemic? We're not even in post-pandemic, right? But I know that from talking to you throughout the last 20 months or so, Arkansas has only been so in terms of shut down and for the pandemic.
Right.
So,
I think that, my assessment is that all of us kind of got tired of the pandemic and sticking to the protocols and safety. I think we did a very good job of that for most of 2020. And I think pastors and church leaders just reached a point where they grew weary of the fights, the battles between should we not meet in person and just keep doing everything electronically, or should we meet? Should we wear masks or should we not wear masks? Should we sing hymns? Should we not sing hymns? Should we sing hymns mask on or mask off? I think all of those decisions were difficult conversations for our pastors. They were getting it from both sides. And I think we just kind of reached a point where it's like, oh, okay, we're just gonna get back to it. and pray for the best in a sense. And, some of the churches certainly kept the protocols going if they weren't getting as much resistance. But, I think a lot just kind of got back to worshiping in person with smaller numbers, because obviously not everybody was going to come back. And I think there's a lot of reality setting in that if we do get to the end of the pandemic, that our congregation is not going to be the same as it was in, beginning of March 2020 before everything shut down.
And is that, you say that as though generally that's seen as a bad thing?
It's a bad thing for churches that are either unwilling or don't have the capacity to do the hard work. I think it's going to be required to do church in a different way, and to embrace the new reality that I think is upon us. And so, in the midst of the pandemic that is COVID-19, there have been lots of other world events happening that the church has responded to. I'm curious, are there, especially in Arkansas, which has a rich history of, I guess, I'm not even sure how to say it, a rich history of, or a deep and wide history of racism and things like that. So I'm curious if the Presbytery has entered into work around anti-racism, things like that, or if there's particular work being done in particular churches that you can share with us. So we've definitely done things as a presbytery to kind of address the topic of racism. We kind of threw out, really in 2020, I think that kind of the awareness was certainly heightened with the visibility of incidents like George Floyd and so many others we could name. That we did several things and they were easier to do because we were using Zoom. So we had several dialogue sessions with African Americans to hear their perspectives, and just recently have created a Matthew 25 task force, kind of a generic name that's kind of looking at this issue. But I think there's more than that that's kind of created this anxiety, the divisiveness that certainly has always been there politically and whatnot. It would be ridiculous to say it hasn't been there.
Right.
But I think it's just been heightened in a sense that every issue kind of becomes, are you here or are you here?
It all becomes one or the other, very polarized.
And there's not much room to be seemingly in the middle of anything anymore. You're either here or you're here.
Right. And
I think that's, in a sense, made it more difficult to have these conversations about, about anything. Even whether, sometimes even should you get a vaccine, which is incredulous for most of us to think that could be a divisive topic. But the climate right now in our society is that so much is divisive, and it is difficult for us to enter into and have some of these conversations.
Yeah, I totally agree. I want to something a little lighthearted. You are known for your video invitations to presbytery meetings. Any of those on the horizon? Any new ones? The first one was a Star Trek thing, right? Wasn't it?
Yes. It was interesting, as this is kind of applicable to this, but also just to kind of what I sensed in our last Zoom Presbytery meeting was that at the beginning, that seemed to be an energizing type of thing. You know, we're faced with this problem of the pandemic. How are we going to do this?
We can do it. Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do it, and let's embrace it. And this is different and unique. So, you know, we were trying to think of things like these videos to, you know, how do we make a Zoom meeting a little bit more interesting? But, you know, by the time we got to the fourth and fifth one, it was kind of like, okay, yeah, here we are, another Zoom meeting, you know, and with all the things that we were planning, do we have time to come up with another, you know, creative video that might attract people's attention? And I think just with the busyness on the one hand and the fatigue on the one hand, we didn't do it for the last couple. But just even recently in my asking that question, you know, because what I noticed was we had more people attend a Presbytery meeting, our first couple on Zoom, than we ever had before in person, because just people curious about what a Presbytery meeting was in our churches would tune in and join us. And it seemed like by the last one, we were pretty much back down to just the commissioners for the meeting and did not have as many visitors with that. So, you know, it seemed like the novelty was kind of starting to fade about that. So,
have there been any decisions or anything made about future Presbytery gatherings?
So we are, I think, hopeful that we will now be moving, you know, people use the term hybrid, but, you know, some combination of an in-person component, but with an electronic component where people can, from their homes, you know, be able to participate and ask questions and vote. So bringing Zoom into an in-person gathering is probably what we're looking for at least a couple of our meetings a year, maybe keeping one of those by Zoom. But our coordinating team just talked about this yesterday, and we realized, you know, as we Presbyterians do, we just kind of keep going back to our old model that we're assuming a Friday night to Saturday afternoon meeting, that you know, it's sort of an opportunity where we can think new. What do we really need to do at a Presbytery meeting? And, you know, we can think of different things that maybe we don't have to meet on the first Sunday in June and the third weekend in October, and just kind of really think what is it we need to be doing and how do we need to be doing it, as opposed to just defaulting back to our previous schedules.
Right. I mean, now is the time to rethink. If you were ever going to change something or create new, I guess, new patterns, now is the time to do that. I've, in my experience in, 17 years at the Synod, I've realized we have very long memories, but they're also very short, right? So there was a day when Synod assemblies were 2 or 3 days long, way back in the day. And then there was, I think, 1 year where there had been a committee to like restructure and things like that. And that committee decided we needed to meet 3 times a year for a day. And it only happened 1 time, but people still remember that as though that was the long history. So it's been really, really interesting. So what are some of the most exciting things coming out of Arkansas Presbytery right now?
So our camp, Ferncliff, continues to do creative and innovative things out at that camp, and you really can't call it a camp anymore. It is a conference center, but it's also an outpost for mission.
And a church. It's got a new
And it's
worshiping
got
community there, right?
1,001 new
Right.
worshiping community working out there as well. So, that is always seemingly there with us, kind of pushing those creative parts of our thinking, because Ferncliff is doing it. And, good for them. I think it's been announced that they've gotten the contract for Credo to be the host facility.
Oh, cool.
For Credo coming up, that is, going to be very good for them, and kind of help their visibility, I think, throughout the denomination. University of the Ozarks in Clarksville applied for one of the Thriving in Ministry grants from the Lilly Foundation that, several mid-councils, I think, have perhaps in their bounds. And we're kind of just starting to get rolling with that. We're kind of excited to see what that brings. And I'd have to give a shout out to our 2 staff positions that we have filled, that they started the week before COVID hit. And Carol Clark and Julie Price have just done an excellent job for us to be able to kind of give attention to congregations and offer things that might be of benefit to them. So, we're currently in a small church vitality workshop with New Matrix that, quite frankly, if we didn't have them and it was just up to me, I'm pulled in so many different directions, attending to whatever fire is burning the hottest, that I just don't see how I would have had, the ability to give time and attention to those things. And that was a very good move for the Presbytery. And the job descriptions were pretty vague that we gave them. And I'm thankful to them for saying yes to it for a position that was unclear what it was going to be. And, it's hard to look back and try to look for positives from COVID, but the pandemic provided them the focus of what they needed to be doing.
Sure.
It was throw everything else out the window. And, they certainly hit the ground running and have their feet underneath them. And, just looking back for something that was kind of fuzzy and, what's this really going to do and how's it going to work? I think it's just been a breath of fresh air for our Presbytery.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I know I've seen a lot of things on social media that I think they're both doing the connections with the local congregations and things like that. It's been really fun to watch.
And our other staff members too, I couldn't neglect them, but Kim Palmer started back in the fall before the pandemic, non-Presbyterian, was new to this world, and she has just been fantastic. And Leslie Belden, who just retired as stated clerk, was just superb in her job and did far more for us than what was in the job description for stated clerk. So it has really been helpful through this challenging time to have a full staff and a talented staff that has really done fantastic work.
Right. And with Leslie's retirement, you have since taken on that role in an interim fashion, right? So
correct.
I'm guessing you have a newfound appreciation for the work of Presbytery stated clerks.
Very much so. And I know that there are that position is not getting the attention that it deserves at the moment. So yes, very, very new appreciation. Well, I've always had an appreciation for stated clerks, but
it's different when you're actually in the role.
Right. It's different when you're there, and some of the deadlines to meet, and just getting, particularly what I noticed is and I don't know if it's in all Presbytery, but our stated clerk is preparing the documents for the Presbytery meeting,
Right.
and getting everything assembled and dotting the I's and crossing the T's to get that information out to the Presbytery in a timely fashion takes an incredible amount of work.
Yes. Yes, it does.
An
And so
incredible
is
amount
the
of paper.
Presbytery, has Arkansas Presbytery begun a search?
We have not begun a search. We have a task force. We also had another staff person, I didn't mention, Breanne Christensen, who was a candidate for ministry, and she did an outstanding job working with our youth, young adult ministry position, but she's taken a position out in Montana. So we're actually looking for 2 positions, and we're trying to have a group to look at, okay, you know, in light of the pandemic, what are our needs, and do those 2 positions and the dollars associated with them, how can we best use those to meet our needs?
Right.
You know, do we need a stated clerk that had half position? You know, one of our huge issues in our presbytery is finding pastoral leadership for churches that can't afford it. Now, we kind of tied with that. Could we have that person be a floater going out? And, you know, there's a challenge there in having those positions match up with the timing of that. So that's kind of fuzzy. So that's kind of what we're looking at. You know, are there duties that the youth, young adult person could shift to do differently? So that's kind of where we are with the group looking at that right now.
Yeah, that's cool. So a couple of last very quick questions that I've been asking all of the EPs that I talk to, just so we can get to know you better. Just quick questions. What's your favorite food?
Valerie, I live for food. I think dinner.
That's why you run so much, right?
Yeah, dinner is the most enjoyable time of my day, and the anticipation of that is almost as good as the meal itself. And I'm one that I love depending on the season of the year. Summertime, I love the fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, and grilling out on the grill. Wintertime, I'm doing more cooking in the kitchen. I'm loving the soups and the chilies and the stews, and looking for recipes to try for bolognese or something. So I'm more in the kitchen in the wintertime. But
I didn't know you cooked.
I do, and I enjoy it. And you know, it seems like the older I get, that's just one of those looking forward to where a meal is going to be and what it's going to be.
Now you are a lover of Italian food, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So my husband John and I are in the middle of sort of binge watching. It's on, I think it's on HBO Max, a series by Stanley Tucci. Do you know who he is? An actor who was, he was in The Devil Wears Prada, right?
Right.
He's going through like different regions of Italy and talking about Italian. It's a great show. You should see that. You should. Yeah. It's been inspiring. Okay. What's your favorite song? Charlie Smith likes to use a hashtag on Facebook, hashtag dashboard pounding tunes. Dashboard pounding tunes. What's your favorite dashboard pounding tune?
Boy, Valerie, that.
Or are you a dashboard pounding kind of guy?
Well, I'm a strange guy in that you'll find various genres of music. You know, back when we had iPods, you know, it's like what all was on your iPod, and it would have been a very strange mix of music. I love that 70s kind of Earth, Wind and Fire, Kool and the Gang type with a great beat. I really like country music and the stories that they tell. It would be, I would really have to, I think, do some research to come up with what my favorite song is. I love to sing
Okay.
in the shower a lot. And,
Ah,
you know, really belt out, then we could go to belting out Neil Diamond with that. So that's a side of me that not many people would ever see, but, music and then church music. My goodness, if you
mm-hmm.
asked me to pick my favorite hymn, I'd have to give you 35 to 40, I think. But, I just love the power that music has to lift our spirits, to get us to reflect, or just to unwind and let
Right.
the stresses of the world melt away.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a very, I think, important and powerful part of our lives.
Um, do you know your Enneagram number?
I'm a 9,
Ah, that explains a
and
lot. Yeah.
I think I don't know. I tell myself that a 9 works well in this profession because
Mm-hmm.
that tendency to, oh, okay, I've worked on this for a while. Now it's time to work on this.
Right.
And, a phone call can happen that changes my priorities in an instant.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with my 9, it helps me move to that and transition and not get as frustrated. My wife is a 1, and it would be more difficult for her. I've got to finish this task before I go do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And I find in this work that I just don't have it doesn't afford me often to be able to do that. I've got to get back to that task after this
Yeah.
crisis has been dealt with.
Right. Right. So you're kind of stretched as a 9.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Between your Enneagram number and the fact that you're a trained accountant, engineer type person explains a lot that I hadn't, that just, it makes total sense
And
to me.
probably does, looking back on it. I know that being confined to that office
Mm-hmm.
was difficult for me. And I
Oh,
found
yeah.
myself getting out, talking to other employees, and they would sometimes come to me just as a listening ear about things that maybe those pastoral instincts were kind of there being nurtured before I even realized what was happening. But
Yeah.
yeah, that confinement in that office was difficult for me, where some people probably would have just absolutely loved that.
Yeah. 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 That's super interesting. And Stewart, I'm so glad you took the time to sit down and talk with me today. I've learned more about you than I had known before, and I'm grateful for that.
Well, it's been a pleasure. And, if we keep doing these podcasts, maybe we come back and see how the church has changed or how the
Oh,
Presbytery
absolutely.
has changed in light of what's going to unfold in the coming months. So it's
Yeah,
going to be interesting to
absolutely.
see.
We will continue the conversation. Thank you so much, Stewart.
All right. Keep up the good work down with the Synod of the Sun. We appreciate you.
Thank you. In the Synod of the Sun, we believe when we work together across boundaries, we make visible the good news and find wholeness as the body of Christ. In our common calling, we impact lives together. So let's remember to connect with, equip, and empower one another in the name of Jesus Christ, today and every day.